She laughed at her father's funeral, not a nervous laugh, not a quiet involuntary exhale that she could pass off as something else. A full audible laugh in the middle of the eulogy, surrounded by people who loved him, while she was inside, completely destroyed. The room went silent, people turned. Her mother looked at her the way you look at someone you suddenly don't recognize. She tried to stop. She pressed the hand over her mouth. She dug her nails into her palm. She stared at the floor and willed her body to respond the way a person is supposed to respond when they are standing 10 feet from their father's coffin. It kept laughing. Her name is Patricia. She was 52 years old, and she had been living with this, the wrong emotion at the wrong moment, every time, with no warning and no off switch, for nearly 8 years. She wasn't cruel, she wasn't broken in the way people assumed. She had a neurological condition so poorly understood that most of the doctors she had seen had simply told her it was anxiety. It was not anxiety. It was something far more specific, far more strange. And once you understand what was actually happening inside Patricia's brain, you will never look at someone's emotional reactions the same way again. It started after a mild stroke. Patricia recovered well, her speech returned, her movement was unaffected, her cognition was intact. By every visible measure, she was fine, except she wasn't. A few months after the stroke, she began crying at things that didn't warrant tears. A television advert, a mildly kind thing a colleague said in passing, a song she didn't even particularly like. She would be sitting in a meeting at work and suddenly her eyes would fill and she would have to excuse herself without being able to explain why. Then the laughing started. At first it seemed like the wrong end of the same problem. She laughed when she was nervous. She laughed when someone described something painful. She laughed during a phone call with her sister who was telling her that their father's condition was getting worse. Her sister stopped calling us often after that. Patricia tried to explain. She told her husband, her friends, her GP. She said, "I'm not finding these things funny. I'm not unfeeling. Something is happening to my face and my body that has nothing to do with what I'm actually feeling inside. I am grieving and laughing at the same time, and I cannot make it stop." Most people didn't believe her, not because they were unkind, but because the idea that your emotional expression could become completely disconnected from your emotional experience is not something most people have a framework for. We assume what we see on someone's face is what they feel. We have assumed this our entire lives. Patricia's condition made that assumption catastrophically wrong. What Patricia had is called pseudobulbar affect. It's a neurological condition, not a psychiatric one, caused by damage to the pathways in the brain that regulate emotional expression, not emotional feeling, expression. The distinction is everything. Think of it this way. Deep inside your brain there's a system that generates feeling, grief, joy, love, fear. That system was working perfectly in Patricia. She felt everything with full force, the way she always had. But there's a second system, a regulatory layer sitting higher up in the brain, in the frontal regions, whose job is to take the raw feeling and translate it into an appropriate outward response, to match the expression to the emotion, to make sure that when you feel grief, your face shows grief. When you feel joy, you smile. Patricia's stroke had damaged that regulatory layer. The pathway between what she felt and what her body expressed has been severed. So the feeling would arrive correctly, fully, and then something would misfire on the way out. The signal would get scrambled. Grief would reach her face as laughter. Happiness would arrive as tears. And she had no more control over it than you have over your heartbeat. PBA affects an estimated 1 in 9 people who have had a stroke. It appears in people with MS, ALS, traumatic brain injury, Parkinson's. It's not rare. And yet the majority of people who have it are never diagnosed, because it looks from the outside exactly like a personality problem, like someone who doesn't care, like someone who is inappropriate, unstable, callous. Patricia spent 8 years being treated as though she was all of those things. 8 years of apologies she shouldn't have had to make. 8 years of relationships quietly ending. 8 years of people deciding who she was based on a brain signal she had no access to and no power to correct. Here's what stayed with the researchers who documented Patricia's case. When she was finally diagnosed, when a neurologist sat down and explained exactly what had happened and why, she didn't cry, she laughed. And for the first time in 8 years, the laughter was real. It was relief. It was the particular overwhelming release of a person who has spent nearly a decade being misread by everyone around them and has finally been seen correctly. She said afterwards that the diagnosis felt like being handed back something that had been taken from her without her permission. Not her emotions, those had never left, but her identity, the right to be understood as a person who felt things deeply, not one who felt nothing at all. Her husband who had stayed, who had chosen again and again to believe our description of our own interior even when our exterior contradicted it, sat beside her in that appointment and held her hand. She cried on the way home. For once, that was the right response. Patricia's story asks something uncomfortable of all of us. How many times have we decided who someone was based on how they looked in a single moment? How many times has a face told you a story? Cold, indifferent, strange, inappropriate, and you believed it completely without asking what was happening underneath. We are taught from the time we were children to read faces. We are told that the face is the window to the self, that what you show is what you feel, that expression and emotion are the same thing. Patricia's brain proved that they are not, that the face is not a window, it's a translation, and translations sometimes go wrong. There are people in your life right now, people you have written off, people you have misread, people whose reaction in one moment became the permanent story you tell about them, who may be living inside a gap you cannot see, between what they feel and what comes out, between who they are and who you think they are. Patricia laughed at her father's funeral because her brain misfired, not because she didn't love him. She loved him completely. She just had no way to show you.